Did Stefano Pioli's move to Saudi Arabia just help Milan sign Joshua Zirkzee? And will this move also trigger the departure of a Milan player to Al Ittihad? That could completely unlock the rossoneri's mercato budget. And will part of that budget be used towards paying the 13 million release clause for Alvaro Morata? As new reports suggest, Milan are accelerating a move for the Spanish striker. Fixtures for the next season have already been released. Now, which one of these players could be there on that opening day? We'll try and figure out in today's episode of Rumor or Real. Well, first of all, I think we have to congratulate the previous coach of Milan and Stefano Pioli. In my opinion, the greatest coach of Milan since Carlo Ancelotti. His salary at Milan was 4 million euros, guys. He has just signed a deal with, it sounds like, reportedly he signed a deal with Al Ittihad from Saudi Pro League. A team that has the likes of Karim Benzema and N'Golo Kante there. And Stefano Pioli just signed a deal, a 3-year deal that's going to pay him 18 million euros per season. He went from a salary of 4 million at Milan, more than quadrupling it in Saudi Arabia. This salary puts Stefano Pioli only behind Pep Guardiola as the second highest paid coach in the world of football. So that in itself is massive for the former Scudetto winning Milan coach. But how does this impact Milan? Now, here's the thing. It is being said by a few news agencies that the amount of money that Milan is going to save. So if he did not find a job somewhere else and he continued to stay not employed, Milan would have to still pay his staff as he still had time remaining on his contract because Milan did terminate it prematurely. This means the fact that he's now employed, his staff is likely now employed, means that Milan's going to save somewhere around 10 million euros gross for this season. Now, the rossoneri management, they were prepared. They were set to pay that 40 million release clause for Zirkzee. They just didn't want to pay that 15 million euros for the agent's commission. They even agreed on a 4 million a year salary for the player. The reports had suggested that the commission that Milan was ready to pay was somewhere around that 8 million mark. Now, that tells you that that difference between that 8 million Milan was willing to offer in commissions and the 15 million that his agent actually wanted, that gap could be bridged by the amount of money that the rossoneri save on the salary they don't have to pay Stefano Pioli and his staff. Now, this is the logic that La Repubblica is using. Does it necessarily add up? Maybe, maybe not. The Milan management still has to be satisfied and be comfortable with the idea of paying somebody 15 million in a commission. Because let's be real, that 15 million, if saved, can be used towards signing a different player. At the end of the day, I believe the highest commission Milan has paid in the recent past was for Charles de Ketelaere's agent or Paqueta's agent, and the amounts are around that 2.9, 2.8 million mark. So will the club be comfortable with paying a commission 5 times more than they've ever paid before? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Some reports suggested that Zirkzee's agent Kia Jarabchian, he apparently is in Milan right now. There's been no reporting of meetings with AC Milan's management, so it's possible he's here on a different mission, he's here for a different player, but this is the latest that we know. The agent apparently right now is in Milan. And could this move of Stefano Pioli to Saudi Arabia, the money saved and not having to pay the coach, could this truly unlock the Joshua Zirkzee move? At this point in time, I think, guys, I'm gonna stamp this as possible. In the past, I've stamped this as unlikely. I'm gonna change that as possible, not necessarily just because of the Stefano Pioli situation, but some of the other news reports that are coming out about some other players that might follow Pioli to Saudi Arabia who could get the club a massive cash injection. And in the last summer transfer window, when the deal for Marcus Thuram fell through, there were a whole host of names that Milan was getting linked with. Romelu Lukaku, Jonathan David, Alvaro Morata, just like clockwork this time. When the deal for Joshua Zirkzee gets a little bit complicated, first the link is of Romelu Lukaku, and now once again we're looking at the name of Alvaro Morata. The only thing, guys, this time, I think it might actually happen. Now, these reports were lightly hinted by Gianluca Di Marzio, but now we have confirmation that there is an ongoing negotiation by Nicolo Schira and by Antonio Vitiello. And if Vitiello confirms there's a negotiation going on, you best believe it is. Now, here's the reality of Alvaro Morata's contract with Atletico Madrid. He has a deal with them till 2026. However, the player does have a release clause that's only 13 million euros. Now, I know that the name of Morata for Milan fans, it isn't very exciting. I know they're gonna look at his age and say he's 31 years old. There's Joshua Zirkzee who's 22. But guys, let's keep in mind something about Morata. The guy has played almost 600 professional matches. He's scored well over 200 goals. He has almost 100 assists. At 31 years old, to get a guy who has this much experience, plays regularly for his national team during the Euros, and has played in Serie A consistently before, a 13 million release clause really isn't too bad. Someone did an analysis on how this player in the past 10 years has scored a goal every 113 minutes. That, quite honestly, stretched out over a decade, is an incredible statistic. The reports actually suggest that this move was initiated by Ibrahimovic himself. So the way that we trusted Maldini's decision-making when it came to defenders, if there's a person we have to trust their decision-making when it comes to strikers, it is Zlatan. In my opinion, this isn't a bad profile to look at. You can't just fixate on his age of 31. It's not like you're paying 40 million like you were for Lukaku. And when you look at the salary, his current salary that he's being paid by Atletico Madrid is 6.5 million euros. Now, as Vitiello said in his tweet, Milan believe that they can actually lower his salary under the 6 million mark. So if you can get a player as experienced as Morata playing at the level as Morata for a decent price with a reasonable salary, I think that's a move you make. And at this point in time, seeing the fact that Gianluca Di Marzio, Nicolo Schira, Antonio Vitiello all are confirming this negotiation, I think this is very much real, and this could actually happen very soon. Now, the proof that Milan's transfer window is moving pretty slow is the fact that we're trying to find connections where there might not be any. The Stefano Pioli connection to Joshua Zirkzee. There's another connection of Douglas Luiz to Emerson Royal. It does sound like, though, this connection might actually have something to it. So here's the deal. It has widely been reported now, we've talked about it in every single video, that for this coach, Paulo Fonseca, the way that the fullbacks play is an important, critical part to how his system actually works. Right now, the confidence in Davide Calabria is not the same as it has been in the past. This coach clearly wants to not sell Davide, but definitely wants to create some healthy competition. The profile that apparently was on the top of Milan's list was that of Matty Cash from Aston Villa. Here's where the Douglas Luiz connection comes into play. Juventus have been on a tear when it comes to this mercato. So any excuses that I was making for Milan and Milan might have about the Euros, about Copa America, and how the mercato hasn't opened up till July 1st, I think you have to throw them all out of the window. If Juventus can get deals done, Milan should also be able to get deals done. But coming back to Douglas Luiz, it looks like Juventus has completed that move, which means that Aston Villa, considering the fact that I believe they'll be playing in the Champions League, they don't want to keep losing all their important players. Douglas Luiz is out now. They don't want to also sell Matty Cash, and if they do sell Matty Cash, they want a good amount of money for him. That brings back into the picture Emerson Royal's move to Milan. At this point in time, guys, before I even stamp this move as anything, I think he might just be the first signing that Milan completes. Nicolo Schira, a very reliable Italian journalist, just tweeted that Milan have agreed personal terms with Emerson Royal. They are signing him until 2029 on a salary of 2 million a year. Now, the only negotiation that is really left is the major part, which is between the clubs in Milan and the Spurs. Now, the concern with Emerson Royal, as pointed out in the past, this is a ex-Barcelona player. He's had a good history of playing for his national team as well. He's had a certain dip in form. Last season, he played 1,300 minutes only. His appearances dropped from 20 in the season before to 11 in the last season. And this drop off in form in the amount of minutes played, it basically eliminated his possibility of playing in Copa America for Brazil. This is a player that has consistently received call-ups from the Brazil national team in 2021, in 2022, in 2023. Suddenly 2024 rolls around, Copa America happens, and Emerson is nowhere near the squad. So for that reason, unlike Matty Cash and some other profiles that Milan has looked at for the right back role, Emerson Royal is a player that is desperate to prove himself, prove his quality from the past that did get him call-ups to the national team. And one important thing that Sempre Milan pointed out in their article is that Emerson as a player would be looking at some of the profiles that have moved to Milan from the Premier League, profiles like Fikayo Tomori, Christian Pulisic, Ruben Loftus-Cheek. He'll look at the fact that these players have moved from the Premier League, they've completely reinvented their careers. They're first-team players at Milan, playing consistently in the Champions League. Apparently, he has received an offer from Villarreal, but he doesn't want to move back to La Liga, and he prefers the profile and the project of Milan far more than that of Villarreal. At the same time, Ange Postecoglou, he doesn't really want this player with Spurs, so it seems like all three parties want to make this move happen. And that's exactly why there's an expectation that even though the Spurs want somewhere around that 25 million mark, Milan wants something around that 17 million mark. Because everybody wants this move to happen, there's a good chance that the teams will negotiate the price down somewhere around that 20 million number. And for that reason, because all parties want this deal completed, this has to be stamped as real. And it's possible, guys, that he might just be the first player that Milan signs this transfer window. And there is a possibility that he arrives even before the preseason starts. Which brings us to the profile that might completely unlock Milan's transfer budget. I mean, it's been obvious that this time around Milan doesn't need to sell star players like they did last season with Sandro Tonali. Ibrahimovic came out in that press conference, confirmed we don't have to sell to buy. And at the same time, the rossoneri, according to all reports, told Bologna that they are going to trigger Joshua Zirkzee's release clause, which is 40 million. That's a lot of money for a club to not sell and just be able to buy. But imagine this deal actually goes through. There was some slight rumbling that Bennacer, during the season, his agent had come out and said that he would consider a move to Saudi Arabia, just not right now in his career. But latest reports are suggesting that that move to Saudi Arabia might just be on the cards now. Milan does have a 50 million euro release clause for this player. In the recent past, we did have times where it was being said that Liverpool was communicating with Milan about potentially triggering that release clause. But at that point in time, the phase and the form that Bennacer was in was undoubted. But now, over the past couple seasons, the injury issues he's had, the up and down in form, if Milan can extract 50 million for this player, I would sell in a heartbeat. Now, a renowned Milan journalist in Alfredo Pedula, he has come out and said that Bennacer is now ready to move on from Milan, and the rossoneri have communicated with some Saudi clubs about a potential sale. The only way that Bennacer would change his mind if he gets some type of an offer from the Premier League. If not from the Premier League, the player is open to a move to Saudi Arabia. Now, the same report also has suggested that Milan would be possibly comfortable in lowering that 50 million release clause to a more manageable number for the other teams that they see his value at. If we do a basic search of Bennacer's market value, it's listed to be somewhere around that 30 million mark. However, the one thing that has changed is that Stefano Pioli move to Ittihad. Because of that move, it's very normal for coaches to join a new team and bring a player from their previous club to the new club, especially players that are maybe a little bit more on the periphery. There's more competition happening for them, and players that have actually stayed at the club, won a title, been an important asset to that team, and might reach a cycle where they're now ready to move on. And you almost feel like Ismael Bennacer fits that profile perfectly. He loves Stefano Pioli. Pioli understandably loves him. He was bawling in tears when Pioli was leaving, and this is a player that has in the past expressed his interest in wanting to move to Saudi Arabia. So is it possible that Pioli goes to the Ittihad management and says, hey, this is the guy that I want. He has a 50 million release clause. If you can pay me 18 million in salary, everybody knows you have the money. Go trigger that release clause and bring this player here. At this point in time, this move, I think it can actually be stamped as possible. It sounds like a win-win situation for everybody. And at the end of the day, he walks away from Milan as a Serie A champion, so it's pretty much job done as well. And on a personal note, as I've expressed for years on this channel in the past that Ismael Bennacer is my favorite player on this team, I also feel like his cycle at this club is now done. Now we have to rely more on players like Reinders and some other defensive profiles. Bennacer came, did his job, won the title. Hope he makes a lot of money in Saudi Arabia and he moves there. Which brings us to another possible Milan departure, and this one has to be of Malick Thiaw to Newcastle United. I mean, this entire report kind of surprised me, but the report is now coming out consistently. Latest one said that Eddie Howe has given his approval, and some reports have even suggested that they have verbally talked to Milan about an offer somewhere around that 40 million mark. Let's be real, guys. For Milan having signed this player, I believe around that 8 million, 40 million would be pretty incredible. So first of all, I'm having some doubts about the evaluation of the player because last season, his performances were definitely under par. His first season was amazing. He was the first center back listed on the team alongside Fikayo Tomori, even started getting call-ups to the Germany squad, but his second season was much weaker. And a lot of the times that's what happens with some profiles. Your first season you can do really well, but the second time around, the teams have sort of read into you. They know what you're gonna do, and they can kind of counter that. And if you can't step up to that, that means you might not be as good a player as you look like in the first season. Now, obviously, injuries also played an important role in him having a weaker season last time around. So would it be responsible for Milan to actually sell this player, or should they give him more time and hope that he replicates the form of the first season around? Or do you think a price tag of 40 million is something that Milan should strongly consider? When it comes to these reports, I don't really know how much I'm actually buying into it. That 40 million evaluation to me for Thiaw seems a little bit on the higher side. And the same report said that, and it could be true, they said that Newcastle has a very good relationship with Milan after how the negotiation for Sandro Tonali last season went. And in my head, I'm wondering, do they really have a good relationship with Milan? Have we not seen what happened with Sandro Tonali? Isn't there anything in their minds that made them think, hey, did Milan know that this player was involved in gambling and that's why they sold him to us? So I really do wonder if Newcastle truly does trust Milan 100% and if the relationship actually is really good. So when it comes to this report, at this point in time, I don't know if I'm going to stamp it as a rumor because I've been reading about it a lot now. I'm going to stamp it as unlikely. There's something in me that does feel like maybe because it is coming from Corriere dello Sport, part of the reporting is coming from them. I don't know how reliable they truly are. So it could also be somewhere tinkering in between unlikely and a rumor, guys. And there you have it, guys. Those are some of the profiles we want to take a look at today. At this point in time, there's a lot of frustration amongst the Milan fan base about the pace of movements. And this time around, now that we're about 5 days from my last video, I kind of agree with that. If Juventus can make those moves, other teams around Europe can make moves. Why is Milan so slow? There's criticism even coming from Gianluca Di Marzio, who's talking about how there are a lot of players that the club is considering, but nothing is actually moving as fast as people would like it to move. So whatever your frustration is, I kind of agree with it at this point. The only thing that I would say is we have, 2 months till the Mercato closes. So let's judge the management with what happens in 2 months and not overreact in just 2 days. And from my side, as always, Forza Milan, grazie mille, ciao tutti. This is the same coach that once walked into a Champions League press conference wearing the Mask of Zorro costume. But one of the biggest questions on the minds of Milan fans is, what are his tactics? What kind of systems does he play with? What kind of formation does he implement? So let's bring out the tactical board and dive right in.